Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here, and welcome back to Kertrats Productions and our continuing watch-through of Star Trek Discovery's 5th and final season. In this video, I'll give you my thoughts on the latest episode, Jinaal, as well as the Easter eggs and canon references I was able to find. Let's get started. At the end of episode 2, Under the Twin Moons, we learned that the next clue to the mysterious progenitor's advanced technology is on Trill. Discovery also got a new first officer, Captain Raynor, formerly of the USS Antares, and Saru left Discovery to pursue his new career as a Federation ambassador and fiancé to the president of Navarre, Terina. This episode picks up all of those threads and takes the story in some new and interesting directions. We learn that the piece of map they picked up last week has an additional clue in it, a Trill spot pattern that matches one Jinaal Bix, a Trill who lived some 800 years ago. Luckily, he was a joined Trill, and the Bix symbiont currently resides in a host who agrees to meet with Burnham after they correctly answer a riddle. However, the clue must be given to them directly by the original host, Jinaal, so a Jantara ritual is performed to transfer the memories of Jinaal into a temporary host body, in this case, Dr. Culber. More on that Jantara ritual in the continuity references section. So this brings me to the first thing I absolutely loved about this episode, Wilson Cruz's portrayal of Jinaal inhabiting his body. He does an excellent job of playing a completely different character with ease and with some genuinely funny moments as well. His delivery of, "Wow, this guy works out," had me laughing out loud. So just a little aside here. If you haven't seen Wilson Cruz's Instagram, you should definitely check that out. And when you do, you will know that, yes, he does indeed work out. The mission to Trill in this episode really worked for me, and I enjoyed the insights into the efforts of Jinaal and his fellow scientists to hide the technology of the progenitors from the galaxy at large, fearing that it would be put to some nefarious use. The name drop of the Dominion War as a motivation to keep it hidden from the Federation also worked very well, as I'm sure those of us who watch Deep Space Nine recall the atmosphere of distrust, paranoia, and willingness to let the ends justify the means that surrounded that conflict. When it came to challenging and testing the limits of what is colloquially known as Roddenberry's vision, Deep Space Nine walked so that modern Trek could run. From there, let's move on to Saru's first day as an ambassador. I really enjoyed him working with the other delegates and doing what he does best, bringing people together. I feel like he's going to be very good at this job, even if he might be a little bit naive when it comes to politics, both on an interstellar stage and on a personal level with his supposed-to-be, Terina. The newly engaged couple have their first fight, and it turns out that Tara Rosling can really turn on the frostiness of an annoyed fiancé when she has to. When Saru makes a faux pas, I swear that room got about 10 degrees colder when Terina gave him the look. Saru's expression as he cops to talking to Terina's aide is adorable as well. He knows that he has stepped in it, but he's also still not quite sure what is going on. Doug Jones plays this perfectly. Speaking of a first day on the job, Raynor is now the first officer of Discovery, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that not only does he no longer command a ship, but he has in fact been demoted in rank to commander. Saru served as first officer while still retaining the rank of captain, much like Spock in the original Star Trek films under Captain Kirk. However, due to his actions on Kumau, Raynor has had his rank taken away from him, which makes sense. I felt that Raynor, in his interactions with Tilly and the rest of the crew in the one-on-one sessions that Burnham ordered him to undertake, gave off a little bit of a Captain Jellicoe vibe. While he obviously goes a little bit far in his brusqueness, I do also feel that maybe Discovery could use just a little bit of his brand of toughness. I know that by the time the season is over, Raynor will have had his attitude changed by his experience aboard Discovery, but I feel like it might be interesting to see how he would in turn affect the culture on Discovery as well. Tilly also puts in a great showing in this episode, even if she's mildly insubordinate to Raynor. I say mildly, but you know. Raynor does demonstrate that he has learned a lot about the crew through his meetings, but Tilly rightly points out that he hasn't demonstrated that to the crew, and that connection is needed for trust to build. As a teacher myself, I see that the experience Tilly has gained from teaching at the academy is informing how she's dealing with Raynor. Kudos to the writers for seemingly incorporating this into her character. I think it worked very well, and I really look forward to seeing their relationship between her and Raynor evolve over the course of the season. And finally, I do want to touch a little bit on Adira and Gray and the apparent ending of their romantic relationship. I'm definitely sad to see it end, but with Gray off on Trill and not really a part of the Discovery story very much anymore, I think it makes sense. I don't have too much to say about this, although it was nice to see Gray again. As with much of Star Trek Discovery, this episode leans hard on the theme of connection, which is a theme that works very well for this show. It makes sense that a visit to Trill would touch on these ideas as well, but I do have to admit, I'm not quite sure what to make of the conversation between Burnham and Culber at the end of the episode. Maybe the words of Jet Reno are echoing a little bit in my mind.
Wow, I just sounded like a woo-woo asshole.
But I do have a feeling that there is going to be a bit of a woo-woo aspect to this season. I'm kind of reserving judgment on all of that until I see how it turns out. But speaking of Reno, it's always awesome to see her again. Tig Notaro in Star Trek might be one of my favorite things to have come out of Discovery. Which brings us to the end of the episode and the planting of what I assume to be a tracker on Adira by Maul. Wherever the next clue takes the crew of Discovery, it seems that they are going to have Maul and Locke hot on their tails. All in all, for me, an excellent episode of Discovery. The highlights are definitely Wilson Cruz as Jinaal inhabiting Culber's body, and the Raynor and Tilly part of the story, and I guess I should be honest, Saru and Tarina's part in the story was also very memorable. I guess really that's most of the episode, so definitely a winner in my books. I should also shout out the dynamic between Book and Burnham. They're always a lot of fun together, and this outing is no exception. I love their kind of casual banter they're able to have, even in a high-stakes, dire situation. These two really have great chemistry. At the start of the episode, we see the USS Lockerer NCC 325062. This vessel is named in honor of J.P. Lockerer, a camera operator for Star Trek Discovery who, sadly, passed away in 2022. I didn't point this out in the review of that episode, but the JP referenced in the title card for the season premiere Red Directive was referring to J.P. Lockerer as well. Adira, in their nervousness leading up to seeing Gray again, has drunk a number of Raktiginos, a Klingon blend of coffee often enjoyed by the residents of Deep Space Nine mostly. On Trill, we once again visit the caves of Makala, the home of the Trill symbionts, first seen in the Deep Space Nine episode Equilibrium, and most recently visited by Discovery in Season 3's Forget Me Not. The Jantara ritual, used to transfer Jinaal's consciousness to Culber, was first seen in Deep Space Nine's Facets, in which Jadzia Dax interacts with all of Dax's former hosts, who are hosted by her friends on Deep Space Nine. We get a direct mention of the definitive year for this season of Discovery. It is 3191. Another starship seen at Federation headquarters, the USS Noble, NCC 325002. We get another reference to the Breen, the third in 3 episodes. Apparently, they are growing increasingly dangerous as various warring factions vie for control of their world. Could Discovery be setting up the Breen as antagonists? I would love to see them again. Among the delegates that Saru is working with is this individual, who may be a Sele, a serpentine species first seen in TNG Season 1 in the episode Lonely Among Us. Jinaal reveals that the reason they didn't share the progenitor tech with the Federation is because the Dominion War was raging. This conflict took place over the last 2 seasons of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and plunged the Federation and the Klingon and Romulan empires into war with the Dominion, the Cardassians, and the Breen. During her brief meeting with Raynor, Dr. Pollard mentions seeing a Binar with a Dakalan boreworm eating its synaptic processor. The Binars were introduced in the TNG Season 1 episode 11001001 and were a species dependent on advanced computer technology to communicate and manage their society. The Dakalan boreworm comes from the planet Dakala, a rogue planet that served as a hunting ground in the 22nd century, visited by the crew of Enterprise NX-01 in the Enterprise episode Rogue Planet. The Bajoran crew member we meet, Commander Asha, mentions that while growing up on Bajor, she was unbeatable at Tongo. Tongo is a Ferengi game, which we often saw Quark playing with Jadzia Dax and others in his bar on Deep Space Nine. We also learn that Nilsson has left Discovery for a new assignment on Voyager. It turns out that the Tribble we saw in Red Directive apparently belongs to Lieutenant Christopher. It is, thankfully, neutered. We get a close look at the Ferengi bartender in Discovery's lounge, called Reds, and he serves Sluggo Cola to Tilly. Sluggo Cola was first mentioned in the Deep Space Nine episode Profit and Lace as a favorite soft drink of many Ferengi. Tilly seems to enjoy it, but Raynor says it looks radioactive. The next clue that the crew gets from Jinaal apparently leads to somewhere in Zenkethi space. The Zenkethi were first mentioned in the Deep Space Nine Season 3 finale, The Adversary, and were said to have fought a short war with the Federation at some point during Benjamin Sisko's career. They have been fleshed out in a couple of different ways in non-canon Trek, notably in the Star Trek novels, Star Trek Online, and a recent arc in the ongoing Star Trek comic from IDW. And finally, after having it suggested to her by Culber earlier in the episode, we see Burnham doing Vulcan meditation from her childhood at the end of the episode. Well, that was everything I found reference-wise in Jinaal. Was there anything that I missed? Please reach out in the comments or on social media. I'm at Kertrats pretty much everywhere. Thank you to the Patreon supporters, as always, and thank you so much to everyone else for watching. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a video. We're going to be reviewing every episode of the final season of Discovery, as well as doing our This Week in Trek videos every Monday. I've been Dan Gunther. Thanks again for watching, and as always, live long and prosper.